Hop right into 6 creepiest legends and mysteries of Arkansas. Dare to watch. Check it out. If y'all don't know, I'm from Arkansas, so we're gonna see if we don't get scared today.
But some stories shatter that image. Today you will uncover 6 disturbing mysteries, cases so inexplicable that even time couldn't erase them. But a warning,
God.
some of these stories are not just legends. They still haunt those who dare to investigate them. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and decide if you have the courage to continue.
We need a light, or I would turn off the lights.
The Phantom Killer of Texarkana. The year was 1946.
Okay. I don't think
a
I've been.
quiet
I
town
may
where
have drove
nights
through
were
there.
peaceful and neighbors knew each other by name. But that spring, an invisible terror took over the streets.
I'll say, in Arkansas, like, not a whole lot goes down, but you got like the more dangerous areas like Little Rock and like Blytheville. But I don't know if I've heard of the Phantom Killer.
Masked killer, nameless, faceless, began hunting young couples in the dead of night. His attacks were brutal, meticulously planned, and he always vanished without a trace.
How are they planned if it's just couples at night? Or does he like track them down and figure out when they're gonna go out? And now that's on some weird shit. If like killing somebody isn't weird enough, you know what I'm saying?
That's how Texarkana earned one of the most chilling nicknames in American history, the town that dreaded sundown. And for good reason, because when the sun set, death lurked in the darkness. It was a February night when 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend, 19-year-old Mary Jean Larey, parked their car in a secluded spot. They were just talking when, suddenly, they saw something terrifying in the rear-view mirror. A man dressed in black, wearing a white cloth mask with holes for eyes, was approaching. Before Jimmy could react, the stranger pulled out a gun and ordered them out of the car. He made Jimmy lie on the ground and, without warning, began to brutally beat him with the butt of his revolver. The blow was so strong that Jimmy's skull cracked in 2 places. Mary, desperate, tried to help, but the killer forced her to run. Panicked, she ran across a field until she found a house, where she managed to call for help. Jimmy survived but spent months in the hospital. The attack seemed like an isolated case, but it wasn't. The worst was yet to come. Just a month later, another attack. This time, the victims were Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore. Their bodies were found inside their car, covered in blood. Richard,
he wasn't as lucky as seems,
had been shot in the head. Polly Ann was brutally murdered and left in the back seat. 2 months later, another couple, Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. Paul was found first, lying in the road with 4 gunshot wounds.
Am I tripping?
Booker.
Paul was found. Did that look like a 6-year-old? What the hell? Why does Paul look like he got a 5-year-old face? And why does Betty look 27?
2 months later, another couple, Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. Paul was found first, lying in the road with 4 gunshot wounds. Betty Jo was nearly 2 miles away, discarded in the bushes, a single fatal bullet to her head. This time, the town realized this wasn't just any case. A monster was on the loose, and he always struck on Saturday nights. Fear spread like wildfire. The sheriff ordered a curfew. No one walked alone at night.
I'll say now, that'll keep him. That'll keep him in at night. Shoot. Say.
Stores closed.
Worried about your teenagers going out doing something
sleeping
stupid.
with loaded guns beside their beds. And
Fair
the worst
enough.
part? The killer seemed to enjoy the fear he caused. The last attack happened in May of 1946. Virgil Starks and his wife Katie were at home when suddenly a bullet shattered their window. Virgil collapsed, dead instantly. Katie tried to escape, but the killer chased her. She was shot in the face, but miraculously survived. With half of her face covered in blood, she ran to a neighbor's house and managed to call for help. The town descended into...
Bro, was it a 22? But if that was, but he popped like the other people. He might have shot multiple times. But damn, if that was a 22, or if it wasn't a 22, golly, how do you survive?
Absolute panic. Police patrolled the streets. Armed groups of citizens stood guard. But the killer, he vanished like a ghost. The police investigated dozens of suspects, but no one was ever arrested. The main suspect was a criminal named U.L. Swinney, who had a history of robbery and violence. His wife even confessed to the crimes in detail, but due to legal technicalities, her testimony couldn't be used against him. Swinney spent years in prison for other crimes, but was never officially charged with the murders. After his death, some investigators claimed they believed he was the killer. But what if he wasn't? What if the Phantom is still out there? Decades have passed, but the story of the Texarkana Phantom Killer still haunts the town. The crimes left such a mark on history that, years later, they inspired the famous film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. And the scariest part? Every year on Halloween, Texarkana screens the movie in a public park, just a short distance from where the murders happened. And the killer? He was never identified. Never.
Dude, we'll definitely have to watch that movie. That's crazy. And like Texarkana is probably an hour away from where I am, maybe a bit more.
Never seen again. Maybe he's dead, or maybe he's still alive, watching the movie alongside the people of Texarkana, waiting for the right moment to strike again.
Fuck.
But this is only the beginning. In Arkansas, it's not always killers lurking in the darkness. There are things even older, more enigmatic, and far more disturbing. Things that defy explanation, that many have seen, but few dare to speak about. The Gurdon Ghost Lights. Gurdon, Arkansas, a small town hidden among the forests of the southern state, where life remains peaceful during the day. But when night falls, something emerges from the darkness, something that cannot be explained. Along the railroad tracks, a strange light appears, floating between the trees. It glows in the dark, swaying as if it were a lantern carried by invisible hands. Those who have seen it say it moves erratically, vanishing and reappearing without warning. Sometimes it even seems to follow those who dare to get too close. There are no streetlights, no sources of illumination nearby, no trains pass at that.
What the hell, is it low to the ground? That's freaky, bro. Because if it's not low to the ground, I saw 4 glowing lights in the sky, like, out in the distance, bro. And my mom saw it, my buddy saw it, and we were tripping. And then I think we saw on Facebook that it was like Fort Chaffee or something. But I think that's just what people are saying. But I don't know, that creeps me out. That gave me chills, bro.
That hour. And yet, the light is there. The legend began in 1931, when William McLean, a railroad foreman, was brutally murdered along those same tracks. McLean was known for being a strict and disciplined man, a boss who did not tolerate mistakes. This created tension between him and the railroad workers. It was on a cold winter night that everything happened. McLean got into a heated argument with an employee named Louis McBride, who had already been warned several times about his conduct. The fight quickly got out of control. Enraged, McBride grabbed a heavy tool, a metal bar used to secure railroad tracks, and struck McLean in the head. The impact was fatal, but McBride didn't stop there. According to witnesses at the time, he dragged the foreman's body onto the tracks, picked up an axe, and decapitated McLean. The motive?
God.
They say McBride wanted to prevent McLean from reporting him for stealing railroad equipment, but if that was his plan, it didn't work. McBride was quickly arrested, tried, and sentenced to the electric chair. And it was after that the sightings began.
Murder might be a bit worse.
Shortly after McLean's death, the first reports of a strange light started to surface. Railroad workers claimed to have seen something glowing along the tracks, as if a lantern were being carried by someone invisible. Some said the light followed them for a while before vanishing suddenly. Others swore they heard heavy footsteps crunching against the railroad gravel, even when no one was around. Many believe the light is actually the lantern McLean carried every night while inspecting the tracks, and that even after death, his spirit continues to wander the area, still searching for his lost head. The legend grew over the years. Travelers, locals, and even researchers have gone to witness the phenomenon. And the scariest part? Many have actually seen the light. Scientists have tried to explain the mystery. Some claim it could be natural static electricity, generated by the friction between the train tracks and the ground. Others suggest it's an optical
more
illusion
common, though? That's
caused
what's
by
weird
distant
about
lights reflecting off the moisture in the air.
Why
But
is it
none
not
of
more
these
common?
explanations fully account for what happens in
Weird.
Gurdon. No study has been able to prove why the light seems to move toward those who try to approach it. Some have tried to get too close. Few have succeeded. There are reports of people who, upon attempting to touch the light, felt an intense cold and heard a sound similar to heavy breathing surrounding them. Others say that as they fled the area, they heard footsteps following them, even when they were completely alone. whether it's a natural
Oh my
phenomenon or
god,
something
that
far
voice
darker.
freaked me
The
out.
truth is that no one has been able to prove what really happens there. To this day, the Gurdon lights continue to appear. If you're brave enough to walk along the tracks late at night, you might be lucky or unlucky enough to see them. But if the light moves toward you, will you have the courage to stand still? Some say that if you run, it will follow you. But if you stay put long enough, you might hear the sound of footsteps behind you. And then, if you're truly paying attention, you may hear a whisper right beside you. Some mysteries never die, and in Arkansas there are those that continue to haunt long after the years have passed. But there are even deeper secrets, phenomena that defy logic, and legends that leave scars on those who dare to investigate them.
What the fuck?
The train deaths, the macabre mystery of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. It was a humid August night in Bryant, Arkansas. The clock had already passed 3 in the morning when a freight train approached a small railway on the outskirts of town. The conductor, familiar with the route, kept his eyes fixed on the tracks ahead until he saw something unusual. There were 2 bodies lying across the tracks. They were positioned parallel to each other, with their arms resting at their sides. The conductor immediately pulled the emergency brakes. The sound of screeching metal echoed through the silent night, but a train of that size, loaded with cargo, couldn't stop quickly. By the time the cars finally came to a halt, the conductor knew it was already too late. The victims were Don Henry and Kevin Ives, 2 teenagers, aged 16 and 17. At first, the police treated the case as a tragic accident. The state medical examiner, Fahmy Malak, declared that the boys had been under the influence of an extremely high amount of marijuana, likely causing them to pass out on the tracks, unaware of the danger approaching. Case closed.
Making them pass out on the tracks. I was thinking maybe they, if it was marijuana, they got high and just maybe thought they could lay under the train as it rode over them. But other than that, you can't tell me marijuana made them pass out unless they fell asleep.
Didn't add up. The boys' families refused to accept this explanation. Both were healthy, athletic, and had plans for the future. Their parents knew they would never put themselves in such a situation. The evidence also didn't match. Don Henry's body had deep cuts, as if he had been stabbed before being placed on the tracks. Kevin Ives had severe head trauma, suggesting he had been violently struck before the train's impact. And then, the case took an even more macabre turn. After months of pressure from the families, a second forensic examination was conducted by an independent specialist. The new report revealed what the boys' parents had feared all along. Don and Kevin were already dead before the train ran over them, and the story only got stranger. Witnesses began coming forward with disturbing accounts. Some people claimed to have seen 2 police officers violently assaulting the boys on the night they disappeared. Others reported seeing a man in a military uniform lurking near the area shortly before their deaths. But there was something even more bizarre. The train conductor and other railroad workers stated that when they first saw the bodies on the tracks, they noticed a large green tarp covering part of the boys. But when the police arrived at the scene, the tarp had vanished, without a trace. That meant someone had been at the crime scene after the accident and before authorities arrived. But who? And more importantly, why? Rumors began to spread. Some theories suggested the boys had seen something they weren't supposed to. In the 1980s, the small state of Arkansas was a major hub for drug trafficking in the United States, and according to independent investigations, there was an active smuggling operation taking place very close to where the bodies were found. Some believe Don and Kevin stumbled upon a drug drop and were silenced before they could tell anyone. Others pointed fingers at powerful figures in local politics, including Dan Harmon, a prosecutor rumored to have been involved in the region's drug trade. Decades later, Harmon was arrested for corruption and drug-related crimes, but he never confessed to any connection with the boys.
What the hell? Rumors that they found a drug drop from drug smuggling, and so they just got silenced before they could say something? That's some of the nuttiest shit I've heard. And like, apparently dude got in trouble, like the corrupt cop or whatever. That's weird.
Deaths. The case, already shrouded in mystery, became even darker when several people connected to the investigation died under suspicious circumstances. Keith Coney, who claimed to have information about the crime, died in a motorcycle accident, but his mother insisted he had been chased before losing control of his vehicle. Keith McCaskill, who had warned friends that he was marked for death after helping with the investigation, was stabbed to death in his own home. And most shockingly, Fahmy Malak, the very medical examiner who initially ruled the deaths as an accident, had already been accused of falsifying reports in other cases. Yet he was never held accountable for the autopsy that prevented the truth from coming to light sooner. What really happened that night remains a mystery. But one thing is certain: someone knows the truth, and that someone has never spoken. Perhaps the answer to this case is buried alongside the evidence that mysteriously disappeared. Or maybe on the dark railroad tracks where Don Henry and Kevin Ives lost their lives, traces of what truly happened that night still remain. A case so bizarre, so sinister, that it sounds like something out of a movie. But in Arkansas, real mysteries are often far more disturbing than fiction.
Yeah, because they never happened.
The Van Buren UFO incident.
Whoa!
On the night
I'm pretty close to Van Buren now. That's creepy.
Of November 12, 1977, the quiet town of Van Buren, Arkansas, became the site of one of the most inexplicable events in the state's history. It all began shortly after 10 p.m. when residents started reporting strange lights in the sky. They didn't resemble airplane headlights or signal flares. They were glowing spheres of various colors, blue, red, and orange, flashing in an irregular pattern. Reports came from all over town. Drivers traveling along the highway claimed to have seen a large metallic object hovering above the trees, completely silent. People living in more remote areas described strange interference in their radios and televisions, followed by a bright white light that seemed to illuminate the entire sky. And then something even more terrifying happened. A farmer named Edward Larkin, whose property was on the outskirts of Van Buren, noticed something unusual that night. His cattle were restless, running back and forth as if they were fleeing from something invisible. He stepped outside to investigate and looked up at the sky. That's when he saw it. Above his property, a massive metallic craft hovered in complete silence. The object made no noise at all, but it emitted a powerful glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Before Edward could react, something impossible happened. He watched in disbelief as two of his cows began to levitate. As if held by invisible strings, the animals were slowly lifted, ascending toward the craft. Edward stood frozen, unable to move or scream. He tried to run back inside, but according to his own account, his body refused to obey. It was as if an unseen force had locked him in place. Then, in the blink of an eye, the craft shot upward and disappeared in an instant. The moment it was gone, Edward could move again. He sprinted back into his house, locking every door and window. But the real shock came the next morning. At dawn, Edward went out to check on his cattle. He found one of his cows, but not in the way he expected. The animal was dead, lying in the field. But the state of the body was beyond strange. The cow had been completely mutilated, without a single drop of blood on the ground. Its internal organs had been removed with unnerving surgical precision. There were no signs of predators, no jagged
weird-ass
cuts.
AI images.
The wounds were perfectly symmetrical, as if created with advanced technology. And Edward wasn't the only one who had witnessed something that night. The Van Buren Police Department received dozens of calls reporting similar sightings.
I drove by there
Some
yesterday.
people said the object hovered over an open field before suddenly vanishing. Others claimed their houses trembled slightly as the craft passed overhead. Curiously, officers who responded to the reports discovered strange markings on the ground in a nearby clearing, perfectly shaped circles, as if something incredibly heavy had landed there. By this point, the mystery had already attracted the attention of journalists and UFO researchers who began investigating the event. However, police reports and government documents related to the case mysteriously disappeared. Whenever someone attempted to obtain official records about the incident, they received the same response. The files had been classified and were not available to the public.
What the fuck do you
Edward
mean
Larkin
they've been
avoided discussing the
classified?
event for years. He claimed that whenever he mentioned the incident, he received visits from strange men dressed in black, warning him to forget what he had seen. The residents of Van Buren never received an official explanation. Some believe it was a top-secret military experiment. Others are convinced it was extraterrestrial contact. The only certainty is that on that November night, something flew over the skies of Van Buren. Something that wasn't supposed to be there.
No, that's fucking
and maybe,
weird,
just
bro.
maybe, it's still watching. The Fook Monster.
The
A
Fook?
small town surrounded by dense forests and treacherous swamps. A place where
Now, I've never heard of Fook, but like I drove by the Van Buren. I drove by the Van Buren police office yesterday. Now that's kind of freaky, bro. But let's see what Fook got.
time seems to move slowly, but where something big moves in the darkness. The people of Fook grew up hearing stories about a mysterious creature, something that lurks among the trees and appears when no one expects it. They call it the Fook monster, a massive, fur-covered being with glowing red eyes that pierce through the night. For many, it's nothing more than a legend, a scary tale to keep children away from the swamps. But for others, the monster is real. The story gained notoriety in 1971.
Like Bigfoot? What does he mean?
When a man named Bobby Ford and his friends had a terrifying encounter. Bobby lived in a simple house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a vast expanse of forest. That night, he and his family were startled by strange noises outside. Heavy footsteps crushed dry leaves. Branches snapped, as if something large was moving near the house. At first, they thought it was just a bear, but when Bobby looked out the window, he saw something that shouldn't exist. The figure stood over 7 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark fur,
AI, but
and its eyes glowed like embers in the darkness. Before he could react, the creature charged at the house. The monster clawed at the walls, trying to break through the wooden door. Panicked, Bobby and his friends grabbed their shotguns and fired at the creature. The sound of gunfire echoed through the forest, but the monster didn't fall. Instead, it retreated for a moment. Then, with terrifying speed, it attacked Bobby with incredible force, slamming him against the porch wall so hard that he blacked out. By the time his friends rushed to help him, the creature had vanished into the trees. The next morning, the police were called to investigate. They found huge tracks in the dirt, footprints belonging to a bipedal creature.
Dude,
but unlike any known animal,
we need pictures.
The house's wooden door was deeply scratched, as if razor-sharp claws had tried to tear through it. The newspapers quickly spread the story, and suddenly the small town of Fook became the center of attention. Hunters arrived, determined to capture the monster, but every time they tried to track it through the forest, the trails would abruptly end, as if the creature had simply vanished into thin air. Reports of sightings multiplied. People claimed to have seen the monster crossing deserted roads in the dead of night. Others said they had heard deep howls from the woods, sounds that didn't belong to any known animal in the region. The bravest tried to chase it down, but no one ever managed to prove its existence. The case became so famous that in 1972, it inspired a movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, a dramatized documentary that turned the Fook monster into a national legend. But as the years passed, the sightings slowed, the footprints disappeared, the howls stopped. The monster that had terrorized Fook for so long seemed to have vanished. Or maybe it's just waiting. The town's oldest residents insist it never left, that it's still there, hidden, watching. And if it ever returns, it won't come with a warning. It will come with a roar in the darkness, a mystery lurking in the shadows, just like so many others in Arkansas. But there are even stranger stories, buried secrets that defy logic and leave behind only questions with no answers. The forgotten corpse of old Mike.
On a hot afternoon, I've never heard of this.
In the small town of Prescott, Arkansas,
never been there.
A man was found dead under the shade of a tree. He carried no documents, no personal belongings, only a few sheets of stationery and some pencils he sold door to door. The townspeople only knew him as Mike. He was a traveling salesman who regularly passed through Prescott, offering his goods with a quiet smile and few words. No one knew where he came from or where he went when he left town, only that every month he returned until that day. With no identification and no one to claim his body, the people of Prescott made a strange decision. Instead of burying him, they took him to the local funeral home, where he was embalmed and put on public display.
What the
At first, the idea was that someone might recognize him. Maybe a friend or relative would come forward to identify him. But days passed, then weeks, then months, and no one came. Over time, Old Mike, as he became known, stopped being a mystery and became an attraction. Decades passed, and Mike's embalmed body remained on display in the funeral home's window. Children would stop to look at him up close. Tourists who heard about the forgotten corpse would pass through town just to see him. To the locals, he had become part of Prescott itself. And so it went for over 60 years. He didn't decay, nor did his body decompose. The embalming process had preserved him with eerie precision. His skin became rigid, his hollow eyes remained open. He looked like a wax figure, but he was real. As the legend of Old Mike spread beyond Prescott, people from neighboring towns came to see him. Some whispered that he wasn't just a preserved corpse, but a man trapped between this world and the next. Many believed Mike couldn't rest because
Is
no
that
one
real?
ever discovered who he truly was, that he was stuck there, condemned to remain on
Is that a
display
real
forever,
body?
forgotten, nameless, without a
That
past.
must be like a fake
It wasn't
one.
until 1975 that state authorities finally decided this was no longer acceptable. A law was passed
1975.
prohibiting unclaimed bodies from being publicly exhibited. And so, after more than 6 decades as a macabre spectacle,
That's nutty.
Old Mike was finally buried. But even that brought no answers. He was placed in a simple grave with no name, no detailed headstone, just the inscription, Old Mike. No clues about his true identity were ever discovered.
I wonder
No
if we can go
missing
visit
persons
old
report
Mike.
matched his description. No family ever came looking for him. Who was Old Mike? Why did no one ever search for him? And the most disturbing question of all, did he ever truly leave? Some Prescott residents claimed that after his burial, strange things started happening. People reported hearing whispers when passing by the funeral home where his body had been displayed for so many years. Others said that at night, lights flickered and doors slammed shut on their own, as if someone was still there. And there are those who believe his spirit still roams the town, searching for a name, a story, a final rest. But in Arkansas there are even older mysteries, stories that defy logic, phenomena that remain unexplained. Some legends don't just haunt us, they never die. So what do you think? Are these just stories passed down through generations? Or is
Chat. Oh my gosh. I won't lie. The Van Buren one gave me the most chills. The last one freaked me out and caught my attention the most, bro. Old Mike. I was about to say, I want to go see Old Mike. That's nuts. And it said, like, 1975, so I wonder how many years Old Mike was up. What the hell, Old Mike? I gotta look up Old Mike. Old Mike, Prescott, Arkansas. What the hell? To 1911. Dude, that happened in 1911? Old Mike. This is so freaky, dude. What the hell? So is that Old Mike? I think that's Old Mike. That's so weird. What the hell? I don't know, but if y'all like this scary shit, let me know. We'll watch more scary stuff, but oh my god, this hit a little too close to home. I love y'all. I'll see y'all on the next one.